Hi, I'm Lex Fullerton. Welcome to my presentation on the impact of changing technology of motor vehicles on road tax revenue in Australia. My background is that I am an adjunct professor at the Curtin Law School in taxation. I have a PhD in taxation law. I'm a retired tax practitioner. I also happen to be the designer, owner and operator of the Solex solar farm in Carnarvon, Western Australia. It is from that perspective that I put forward this presentation. In June 2016, we took delivery of a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, which was to serve the basis of a case study for the use of renewable solar energy as an alternative source of energy for motor vehicles in Australia. Prior to examining how much fuel is displaced by the use of renewable energy in electric vehicles in the transition from fossil fuels to electricity for passenger vehicles in Australia and the world in general, we first look at the volume of fuel consumed by the internal combustion powered engines of current SUVs, sports utility vehicles, which are on the market in Australia, and a sample of them are used here. This sample closely resembles those of Galvin's laboratory trials that he conducted in 2017. In order to compare how much revenue might be lost through the displacement of fossil fuels, in particular fossil fuels used on the road, we look at Australia's tariff rates, which have remained largely unchanged for over 10 years, because earlier on it was decided that if fuel excises kept pace with inflation, then fuel would simply become too expensive in Australia. So for that reason, the tax excise rates were frozen. However, in 2015 it was decided that they were not keeping pace with inflation, and indexation of road tax revenue on fuel excises was reintroduced. It is now over 40 cents per litre. Fuel tax revenue in the years 2005 to 2016 varies. Australia has an unusual system. It collects gross excises on all fuel used on the roads. Then it hands back fuel tax credits to certain vehicles, heavy transport and those which are off-road. Despite the fact that fuel excise is not hypothecated or directly appropriated to the roads, it certainly appears that way because Australia recredits the taxes paid by off-road industry and, curiously enough, heavy transport. So the fourth column shows the net revenue, which is about $11 billion in 2016. Let us turn to the growth of electric vehicles in Australia, see what an impact that a change from combustion fuels, combustion engines, to electric vehicles might have. And we find that it's a very, very small base. In 2016, a mere 6,500 electric vehicles were on Australian roads out of a total number of 13.8 billion and over 22 billion of all vehicles on Australian roads. The percentage of Australian electric vehicles was less than 0.03%. It is nothing. It is so small, it's hardly worth this discussion. However, it's been considered that there will be a savage rise in electric vehicles, and we must look at the impact on revenue caused by the transition of electric vehicles to road revenue. What do we find? What is the impact of electric cars on road tax revenue? Well, quite simply, it's not hypothecated. In 1959, any connection between road tax revenue and expenditure on roads was cancelled. In any event, the market is so small, it is very little. Let us look at the possibility of future proportions of electric vehicles on Australian roads. If we consider the earlier uptake of cars, which is around about 12%, and we run that through to 2035, at current values, it comes out to about nothing. Okay, so let's assume that it runs at 42.5% compounding, which is what the table indicates on the basis of market update at the moment. We could find that it might rise to 20% by 2035. If one is really fortunate, it might even rise to 30% in 2035. At that point, it might become considerable in that 1/3 of the vehicles on Australian roads would be electric and therefore not paying fuel excise. Does fuel excise make a difference? If we have the energy sources of petrol or diesel, the operators of ICEs, internal combustion engines, will pay fuel excise, GST and licences and registrations. If they transfer to electric vehicles or hybrid electric vehicles, in the case of the case study that we've used here, they will not pay the fuel excise because they're using mains electricity. They will, however, continue to pay GST and their licence and registration. What is interesting is that any pollution that might be perceived to be saved using this method of charging electric cars is a myth. In point of fact, you may even consume more fossil fuel with more pollution because of line losses and generation losses in getting the electricity to the car. There's an alternative. One could self-generate by purchasing a generator, in which case there will be no fossil fuel, but you still pay GST on the fuel that you buy after your fuel excise credit, but you would still maintain licence and registration. On the other hand, if you were to self-generate using a solar system, as in our case, you would not pay fuel excise, you would not pay GST, but you would still be liable for your licence or registration fees. Our system used in the case study of the Solex project is very, very simple. You can see it is a very, very basic, simple 15 amp general purpose outlet plug. I've put a meter on that so I can ascertain the data of the volume of electricity sourced for this motor vehicle in its normal day-to-day running, so we can quantify it. It is worth noting that all energy used through that meter from the Solex project is solar renewable energy. There is no mains electricity consumed in this project at all. The solar system that's on the building of the farmhouse, which supplies the power station for the case study PHEV, is simply a roof-mounted common garden variety solar PV installation. In this way we have a legitimate tax avoidance scheme. We pay no tax simply because we generate our own renewable energy and we purchase no fossil fuels, nor do we generate pollution. There may be factors that make a difference to the expected outcomes. If we were to look at the previous rate of uptake, we find that there's very, very little. However, Simpson wrote about solar champions and the influence of individuals on markets. The fossil fuel industry likes the business as normal case. However, the question is, does the frog tire and the obvious outcome eventuates? Or alternatively, will the stork choke him out for the frog to fight another day? Or will the frog choke the stork and be victorious in point of fact? It's all a matter of the future, and no one really knows what the future will bring. But individual determination can make a difference. In the case of solar PV installations, the following graph shows that there was a considerable uptake, caused, according to Simpson, by a few solar champions who caught the imagination of the public, and you can see the meteoric rise in installations which occurred in 2009-10. If that was to be replicated in electric vehicles, and it well might, because the households who have solar installations, which is around 1 in 4 in Australia at the moment, they could well cause a disruption to the usual statistical analysis and the flow, and therefore in a very short time almost a quarter of vehicles in Australia could be electric. We would see solar powered car parks which could become the norm. Oh, by the way, it is the norm. Here's a photograph of one, I believe it's in the UK, where people go shopping, and while they're shopping they charge their car up. However, the focus of this particular case study is, what is the impact of electric cars on road tax expenditure? Well, the answer is simply none. There is no connection between road tax revenue and road expenditure in Australia. Any nexus or hypothecation was cancelled in 1959. Thank you very much for your patience in listening to this. Bye. This presentation supports the paper, The Impact of Changing Technology of Motor Vehicles on Road Tax Revenue, which is available at the Social Science Research Network website at the website address given below. Thank you so much for listening, and please refer to the paper. Thank you.